starting to explore what future regulations would need to be put in place to help, at a minimum, get to the new SB 32 statutory requirements. And that will require a very large chunk in EVs. I work closely with our teams that do sustainable community strategies. You've heard a little bit about that today. A lot of that has direct relevance to what you're talking about here.
Today is December the 8th, 2017. We are in Riverside at the county building. We are here today because the California Transportation Commission Technical Advisory Committee is meeting here today. They only meet a couple of times a year, and they usually meet all over the state, so I have never had an opportunity to actually go to one of these meetings. In this meeting today, they are going to be discussing taxing us by the mile. They want to tax you and track you for every mile that you drive, because the intent is to make it so expensive to drive a car that you are unable to.
The pilot observations for mileage reporting methods, remember we had a variety of options. We had plug-in devices, smartphone devices, in-vehicle telematics. Those were more technological, and we had a time permit, mileage permit, and odometer. The more manual options are probably provide, and they do provide the most privacy, because you don't really need to give any of your private information. You just buy a permit and drive, or you go into an odometer station and have it read, or you take a picture of your odometer. So those are pretty, from a security aspect, very good. But from an administrative aspect, it could be difficult as far as the compliance and making sure that there is no evasion in that. Because how do you know when somebody's exceeded their miles and their mileage permit? It's really kind of an honor system at this point, or are they, the time permit again? You need to be able to enforce. How do you know when people are going to re-up on their time permit? The in-vehicle telematics is probably where we see the most flexibility and movement in the automotive industry. As more and more vehicles having the in-vehicle telematics, having Wi-Fi, there is more opportunity to integrate a road charge within that system, in their systems, and being able to communicate from vehicle to infrastructure. But there are some drawbacks. What we saw in the pilot, in order to participate in using the in-vehicle telematics, you had to have a subscription. Well, first of all, your vehicle had to be equipped to do it. You had to have a subscription to that service. Now, if you have a new vehicle, it's probably part of your package for 3 years. But if you have an older vehicle, or you bought a used vehicle that has in-vehicle telematics, you would have to purchase a subscription. One of our participants did do that. They went and bought a subscription so they could participate using the in-vehicle telematics. So there's that obstacle. The other obstacle is you had to provide your login credentials to the commercial account manager. So that required you to get your password and your user ID, which is, would kind of make me kind of feel like, yeah, I don't have one vehicle with in-vehicle telematics. So, but I think that is an issue that needs to be resolved, as to how do we access that information without having to get that personally identifiable information or your login credentials to be able to just pull that data down. And one of the other aspects of it is the GPS, or your location-based aspect of it. Right now, the vehicles, they have that capability. They have the location base, because obviously you get your GPS location and mapping in your vehicle, but it doesn't provide that automatically for a road charge. So we weren't able to really identify when you were driving out of state or off-road. It had to be, in order to do that, you have to ping or query the car to pull that data out, and that constant pinging or querying the car is very expensive. So there's got to be some other solution to, the mapping, not only just for in-vehicle telematics, but in general, the mapping needs to be clear, and so, you know, there are advantages of in-vehicle telematics, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of communications with the auto manufacturers and whoever for being able to access that. That's why we're saying like 2025 might be the year that it could be, if RoadChart is a viable solution, it could be implemented.
I just wanted to ask about time permit as a recording or as a payment version. How were people satisfied with the time permits? Is that is the least technological method, right? So I assume and the one that is arguably the most privacy preserved, because it does not even require the state to know how many miles you've driven. So I assume that's going to be, that is something that we're continuing.
Right, the time permit in the pilot, we didn't have a lot of participants that opted in for the manual options, but of those that did, they were satisfied with the time permit. The one problem that we did encounter is compliance, because they bought a time permit for, I don't remember, 60, 90, 120 days. I'm going to have to go back and look, but when it was time for them to re-up, we got a lot of people falling off because, you know, there's no money involved. That's where the compliance issue comes in, is how do you make sure that they are going to renew their time permit? And for the pilot's purpose, you know, we had to do pretty extensive emailing them or contacting them on a, you know, once it expired, almost on a daily basis to get them to re-sign up. So that's where the difficulty comes in the time permit, but it's not something, it was very low cost to administer other than that compliance aspect.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So I guess I've been thinking about just what we talked about in May, where, you know, put 20 bucks on number 5. So I was thinking with this telematics, I just was wondering if the technology is going in this direction at all, which would be that possibly, like, let's say you pull in and you have a gas car at this point, and there's some kind of telematics on the car, or maybe it's a plug-in thing that can keep track of how many miles since the last time you filled up. So it has to be filled a little bit with, I mean, it has to be associated with the gas tank, I guess. You know, and so it doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't matter if your name's Joe or Mary. It's this car just drove 75 miles, or 130, and, you know, and then, and I can imagine the gas station thing saying something like, this is what you're being charged gas tax, this is what you're not being charged, you know, like almost calculates, particularly for the marketing element of it in the beginning, so people relax a little bit about it and realize it's kind of replacing. You know, this is what your gas tax would have been, and this is your bill. Because it's, you know, that could just capture when you care. Because you don't care other times, but when you want gas in your car, you care. So I was just thinking that possibly, I don't know if people are, I'm asking and just suggesting, if not, are people looking at something along those lines?
That's exactly what we want to be looking at in our pay at the pump, is just that type of technology where it is really, it's so easy, you just get out of your car and pump it, and it's almost like you have a prepaid wallet attached to your vehicle, and you don't even have to put in a card or anything because it'll take it out of that prepaid wallet. I don't know, you want to explain it, Brady?
Sure. Yeah, essentially the car would pull up to the pump and there'd be a wireless handshake between the vehicle and the pump infrastructure. And it's already been proven. It was a proof of concept at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's done every year. In fact, auto manufacturers attending that show has increased substantially. Almost 40% of vendors at the show now are auto manufacturers. And so electronics certainly are entering the vehicle, and we see it kind of being as seamless as using Apple Pay, Android Pay, things like that. Today you can go and wirelessly pay for a transaction at the point of sale without ever having to pull your card out of your wallet. You can use your smartphone for that kind of stuff. well, our vehicles are becoming just as smart as our phones. And so we see that certainly being something that we should investigate further and be mindful as we move forward with this research.
Minnesota is looking at the use of mobility as a service, as a revenue collection method. So it's more putting it in line of it's just another service like your utilities, shared economy. And then Washington is doing a interoperability multi-jurisdictional, so they are going international, so going across the border to British Columbia or Vancouver, yeah, Vancouver. And then also with Oregon. So they're doing interoperability aspect of it.
Lots going on, and clearly when you see what's happening, and again, being respectful of those that commented at the beginning of the meeting, the federal government wouldn't be looking at this, and all these states wouldn't be looking at this if we didn't have a serious problem with what's looking at long-term with the gas tax, especially if we see 25 years from now, you've got half the vehicles on the road are electric or some kind of non-fuel. Obviously, we've got to continue to figure out ways to fund our roads to be able to get to work, to be able to get freight moved, etc. Any comments or questions beyond that for Karen? Yeah, Supervisor.
So with all these states starting these further studies or new studies, it's going to be interesting to see and get feedback from them. So for instance, looking at the Missouri, where they're charging a fee based on the miles per gallon of the vehicle. When you take a look at equity issues, you could have with vehicles that each get 60 miles per gallon. One driver's retired and he drives 1,000 miles a year, and he's paying the same fee then as somebody who's a salesperson who drives 52,000 miles a year. And they're also paying one time at the registration at, when they register the vehicle, as opposed to the gas tax, which is spread out during the year. So getting feedback from some of the states that are enacting some of the real interesting types of programs for VMT is going to be interesting. Also, the feedback will be very telling with regard to looking at the different states and the interoperability between the different states, and then whenever it gets rolled out, perhaps at a federal level, whether the same vehicle miles traveled fee would be the same for each state or different based upon what each state needs for their road funds. And then how you're going to collect the data and keep track of the payments. If you don't have the GPS option and you cross the state line going from California to Oregon, for instance, then how do you keep track of the miles if you're a California resident when you go into Oregon and then when you come back for those Oregon miles and X cents? So it'll be interesting. We want to make sure that, we gather all the data so that in the end, we can give all this information to the legislature and figure out best practices for moving forward.